and forth to New York.
Sorry, there we go.
Got it. Continue to travel back and forth from New Zealand to New York, which now that I look back was absolute madness, but it was a lot of fun. I would leave. I was a single mother at the time. Would leave my little boy with my mother, and my business was in New York, and so I kind of had this best of both worlds situation where I'd go for work and then come back, and I did that every 8 weeks or so. With a newborn at home, and would pump in like airplanes and cabs and on the corner of streets and all of that. And then COVID happened, and travel was no more. And so a lot of the work I do now is still online, and I have a wonderful partner and another little baby. So I had my second child I had my second baby about 5 months ago. She's like just 5 months now. So I've got a 4-year-old boy and a 5-month-old girl. And I have experienced all of the things and all the kind of array of emotions in the topic which we're kind of speaking about today, this kind of theme of identity and motherhood and the shift that happens. A lot of that for me has been moving from, what I considered my home, New York, back to New Zealand. So there was that kind of shift, which amplified everything for me as well. I've gone from being a single mother to, being in a great partnership and then having 2 babies and the whole thing. So we can get into all of that. But Rebecca, tell us about you.
I am Rebecca. I have 2 kids, also an older son and a younger daughter. Finn is almost 12 and Dottie's almost 8. So I'm like 4 years beyond you, and they're great and so much fun. I'm so obsessed with them. I was a stay-at-home mom for years with them. I was laid off when I was pregnant with Finn, and so it just kind of worked into like, okay, this is what I'll do. And I was like full mom all the time. It was great, but it leads to like a lot of confusing feelings about like who you are and individually, and like what is your life beyond being a mother. And I struggled with that a lot and had to find different paths to like feel connected to myself outside of being with my kids all of the time. And then separating myself is the wrong word, but started to do things on my own and work more, and like the kids were going to school full time, and then I was presented with all this free time to actually like rethink of what I wanted to do with my life, and what kind of things I would be involved in work-wise. And now I'm working at By Heart, and I've been here for a few months, and it's awesome because I get to sort of integrate my momness in with work, and I love that. So I can talk about kids and motherhood and all of those things that I feel really deeply rooted in, but also be able to like have a life beyond my kids with them still centered, which I love.
Yeah. What did you find? So for everybody here, we're going to chat for kind of 20 minutes or so just about our experience. And then we'd really love to speak with all of you, and no need to turn the camera on at all. We just love for this to be kind of will lead to an open conversation. I guess, Rebecca, my question for you, what have you found hardest? I think what's really interesting is that you were a stay-at-home mother, and then now you're a working mother. What have you found most difficult?
In terms of motherhood?
In terms of the shift within yourself, I think that we could talk all day about the hard things.
I think that for me, when I first had Finn and I was like really, you have a baby and you're like, you're just in baby world. And that was great. And I loved that. I loved everything about it. And then, when he was about 2 is when I finally was released of this fog of early motherhood. And your baby gets older and they're more independent and they nap less, and like all these things that gives you more freedom to move around. And so it took about 2 years for me to sort of break out of that and to think okay, I actually need to focus more on myself, because I felt like I was losing myself a little bit. So I got really deep and started thinking about the things that I could do to make me happy that were different from Finn. And one of them was running, and I hadn't ran in a long time. And so I got back into running, and now I'm a coach and I run marathons. And so for me, that was like something physical I could do because I'm a busybody. And I knew I needed to do something that was like all about me, and something that I could do with my kids if I needed to. I could take them out in the running stroller, but most of the time it'd be better if I just woke up in the morning and did it on my own. And sort of having that accountability with myself really paid off to help me shift from being full-time mom to like mom and a human. Like,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm thankful because I have really supportive friends that were, I was the first of all of us to have babies. So I had supportive friends that like, you know, would remind me that I'm doing a good job as a mom, but also keep me connected and like doing things outside of that. You know, it just kind of shifts your whole perspective and like what's important and how you approach things.
And how have you found being at work?
I love being at work. So I sort of started like I was a postpartum doula part-time, and I've had part-time work here and there. So I really loved, you know, doing postpartum doula work because that was something that was like, oh, I can be a mom to moms. And this is something that I feel really passionate about and felt that I could offer a lot. And there was a lot of value in having me in your home as you're transitioning into your new role as a mother. And then with quarantine and all of these happening, I realized like, God, I feel like I'm the ultimate caretaker, and I'm caretaking for my kids, and I'm caretaking for other families. And while I love it, it really felt like too much, and that I wasn't taking care of myself enough. So then I started to transition more into like, you know, office work, for lack of a better word. And I have to say now I really love it because it helps me prioritize what I'm doing. So I can like prioritize work and keep that separate from being a parent, but also not taking work for me because I don't know, because I didn't work for so long. I'm having an easier time like shutting myself off at the end of the day and saying, okay, no, this is my time for my kids and I'm focused here. And I feel more appreciative of my time when I'm with them because it's less than it was before.
Yeah.
So I think it makes me stronger as a mom to have this separation from my kids, and not only physically, but also like my brain power.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that when you are in that space of trying to be with your kids, but then you're kind of half working, half mothering, and you just end up feeling like you're doing nothing well. And having some sort of separation where you can kind of be like, this is my work time, this is my kid time, is great. The pandemic has definitely screwed with that. Those boundaries. And I think that's why, there's all of these, I loved what the New York Times did, or the kind of the parenting of that, where they had like a hotline that you could call into scream down. And I was like, that's amazing. And how interesting that the majority of all of the people who called in were mothers.
Yeah.
We're not going to turn this into a COVID chat. Don't worry, everybody. But I think the pandemic has just amplified the responsibility and the load that we carry. It's something that I speak with quite regularly about, with my girlfriends, and how, in a lot of ways, this whole kind of, I don't know, feminism as a very collective term, we're still focused on equality, which attributes like power and value in a masculine sense. So it hasn't been quite defined properly, I don't think. And so oftentimes I think, wow, it's great, we can work and do all of the things, but I often feel like I have to both be just the man and the woman now.
Well, yeah.
So,
one of the things I don't love anything about the pandemic, but one of the things that I think has been really great that's come out is that there's been a lot of talk on like the mental load that parents probably mostly mothers, but all parents have. So like your day isn't just wake up, go to work, get your things done. It's like, we really need to think and prioritize in our heads the things that have to get done, which are like, what are the kids' needs? What are my needs? What are work needs? What like, and then where's my leisure time? And how do I make sure my kids have everything they need? And there's doctor's appointments, there's buying clothes when they run out, they grow out of their clothes. Like for me, every winter, it comes every year. Every year it's going to get cold. Every year there's winter. Every year, the day before a snowstorm, I'm like, oh my God, I forgot to buy clothes. And like, they don't have all these things they need, but it's like that mental load. Every night I'll like go to sleep thinking like, okay, what are all the things I need to get done and how do I prioritize it? And then with the pandemic, it was like this extra load of how can I make sure my kids are going to end up okay? And that all of these things that they're being dealt with don't feel too big and really affect them in the future. So it's like a whole extra emotional load that we're dealing with kids, my kids' age that are school age, but also your kids that are younger. And like, this is sort of the norm for now. And, I can't even imagine having a baby and you like,
yeah, it's
how
been a whole
different for
thing.
them. Yeah.
And in some ways I'm like, oh my God, thank God I didn't have to school my children, because I am no teacher, so that's the disadvantage, I guess, of having kids who are actually in school years. The upside being that they can get vaccinated. I think with my kids, being in New Zealand has definitely provided us with this quite like insular bubble, as we were talking about earlier. But now that we're kind of just starting the school year and going back to the whole kind of motherhood, and I've always really struggled with, I really love what I do. Like I love my work. It's a huge part of who I am. And I've always struggled with, but I really love my babies, having those two really conflicting priorities. Of course, my kids will always come first. But I still love to do what I do outside of being a mother. And I think for me, especially the shift going from 1 to 2 has been so harrowing at times. I think because having her in lockdown, my little boy wasn't in kindy, and I went back to work at 6 weeks postpartum. And so I had this like toddler and like this baby, and a lot of me going back to work was also like, I wanted to, not full time, and I don't go to an office or anything, but it's just been, again, as you said, this kind of extra layer. And now my little girl, she's going to be 6 months old in a month, and she's going to go to daycare, and it's only 3 days a week, but I'm still like, oh, she's she's going to be exposed. I'm like, oh great, she's going to go to daycare for 1 day and then come back sick. I always tell my girlfriends who are like new mothers who have like, it's their little babies or their toddlers are going on their first day to daycare, and they're going for like however many days a week, and they're like, oh my God, I can finally go back to work. I'm like, you realize you have to have a buffer of like them not being at daycare for like 80% of the time for that first 6 months, because they're going to be really sick. Anyway, I'm rambling, but it's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot. I mean, and even the daycare thing is like, you drop them off and the drop off is terrible, and you feel like, oh my God, you're traumatized all day because you feel like your kid was crying, and like, how are you can continue with your life when you know that your baby's like upset in daycare or preschool or wherever. And so even then, like, as you're like, oh my God, I'm going to drop them off, I have all this free time to like get things done, you're mentally right in the forefront of your head is like, are they okay? Is everything going to be okay? What's tomorrow going to be like? Like, are they going to sleep tonight? Will I get a break? And it's just that constant shift of having to go really hourly and maybe minute by minute from like, okay, stop thinking about your kids for 5 seconds. Do what you need to do. Okay, wait, now I'm thinking about the kids again. Like, wait, nope, let's go back to just thinking about what you need to do. And it's hard to figure out how to like balance that out. and not bring a level of resentment into it, because I find that for me, when I feel like my kids are taking me away for something, or I feel like I'm not with my kids for whatever reason, there's like resentment, like running, for instance, if my kids are, you know, home and I can't go for a run when I want to one day, I'm like, well, oh God, if they weren't here, I'd be able to like go do this thing I love that like gives me joy and takes a load off. But and then when they're not with me, I'm like, where are they? And like, how do I live a life? Yeah, what are they doing? It's just constant.
Yeah. Oh no, I feel you. Yesterday, my little girl had been up since 3 a.m, decided to cluster feed till 6. So I was up from 3 to 6. And then my little boy came in and I was like, well, I guess that's the day started then. And then I woke up and I had all of these emails and I'd like screwed up the scheduling for not this talk, but like another talk. And I was like, of course, it's raining. My little boy had this huge tantrum because the toothpaste was too spicy and was like burning his mouth, even though it was like the kid's toothpaste he chose. Anyway, it was one of those mornings. And then I dropped him off to kindy and he was screaming and I was like, I like yelled. I'm not a yeller. And I was like, I cannot cope. And I like had to shut myself in a room. It was like, isn't there like a Sex and the City scene where maybe in one of the terrible movies where Charlotte is doing the cooking and she likes one of her kids, I don't know, something, there's some scene and she like shuts herself in the pantry. Like I was that.
Yeah.
And then I had to drop my kid off and he was screaming. And then, so as we were talking about earlier, my son is to my ex-husband and he was picking him up that day and he was going to be at his house that night. And so of course the whole day I'm like, so the last thing I said to Ra was like, I can't cope. Well, no, and I dropped him off and I was like, I love you. And, you know, all of that. So that was fine, but he was still really upset. And then I don't see him for the night.
Yeah.
And so anyway, why don't we open up this conversation to anybody who wants to kind of jump in? If you have kids, if you don't have kids, the whole point of these sessions is to kind of have group conversation. And Rebecca and I have just done some venting. So I would love to hear from you guys, you ladies, you people.
Hey guys. I honestly this is so refreshing. You have no idea to like hear everything you guys are talking about. I can relate on like every single level.
Oh, good.
I'm actually like a New Zealander. I live in the States. And I guess like it's been a tough couple of years. I had my first baby a year ago. He's actually just turned 13 months. But like so many things, like I've always been super career orientated and then like never really thought through. I'm like, oh yay, a baby's going to be amazing. But like didn't really understand the gravity of like bringing this human into the world and then like how you balance that with your career. So I think that not being able to get home to New Zealand through COVID, not being able to get my mum over here, she's still not met her first grandbaby. Like, I feel like I haven't yet got like that community support around me of my girlfriends from back in New Zealand. So, you know, just trying to navigate everything has honestly been, don't want to like get upset, but a little bit overwhelming. But totally worth it. Like honestly, like the most amazing experience and stuff. So it's just like, honestly, I just wanted to say very refreshing to hear everything you guys are saying, and still trying to figure out like what's that balance, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, Charlotte, as a fellow Kiwi, my heart just goes so out to you. I think that where are you in the States? Are you in New York? Is that what I heard?
I'm actually in Dallas, Texas.
New Zealand is a very kind of family-based, we have a very family-based culture. And I think there is so much grounding that, Charlotte, you'll know from growing up in New Zealand, that I just know that you know what you're missing out on. And that's why I just have so much compassion for you. And I just like to say, or just like to offer that 13 months is still so fresh. Like you're still so new. You should not have this figured out. Like I'm 4 years in, I don't have it figured out at all. I'm clearly still like yelling at my kid that I can't cope and he's 4 years old. So, gosh, like you are to just be doing what you're doing and having that baby in a foreign place, even if you've been there for however long, it's still not home. And to not have your mum, I just message me anytime. Like, I want to help. But
Thank you.
it's a lot. It is so much to have your first baby.
Yeah.
I think it's such a steep learning curve.
And actually, like, my two brothers live over here, but it's not the same. Like, boys, like, it's not the same. They're like, cool, a nephew, but like, I don't know, they're kind of like doing their own thing. So it's a positive, but like not as helpful as like my girlfriends or my mother. But yeah, and you're so right. Like, I know what, you know, my son is not being able to like get, like, from not taking him home, and like the freedom that we have there, and like growing up on the beach like I did. Like, it's landlocked here. So it's different, and it's been challenging but amazing at the same time. So
13 months is still so new, and you're still half in baby phase and now like entering toddler phase, and it just changes. And just when you think you've caught your breath with it, you have another kid. You have but a different kid within your same, like it just goes back and forth all the time. But I do feel you. I live in New York and my family's in LA, and while that is nowhere near what you have to deal with, like missing out on day-to-day life with my mom and my sisters with my babies was hard too, because it's like, you want your family around. So I feel you, and I definitely appreciate how hard it is to not be able to go home. But you're doing great.
Thanks. Hopefully soon to make the trip.
Anybody else who wants to talk about their experience?
Hi, it's Pi. I'm not going to go on camera. I actually cried like 3 times in this conversation already. So, Charlotte, I had a really similar experience to you. I'm Australian, and I lived in the US for 13 years in New York, LA, and most recently 4 in San Francisco, where I had my boy. And he is 2 and 3 months. And about 6 weeks ago, we moved back to Australia. And it's been really good for all the reasons we just outlined, but also I've had to take a step back from my career. So I'm only working sort of a day a week. He just started daycare. So Rebecca, who's a dear friend of mine, has heard my tears about how hard that transition has been for him and for me, because he was in a nanny share in San Francisco, and we just had a very small life due to the pandemic, which was one of the reasons we chose to move back to Australia. But yeah, it's hard trying to have an identity when you have built your identity around your career. And sorry, that was my husband just calling, interrupting my Zoom, because he did daycare drop off today because I couldn't handle it. I was like, I'm not doing it anymore. I just have been sobbing in a corner for.
Oh, Pi.
It gets better, Pi. Oh, Pi.
She dropped. God, the daycare drop off is brutal, isn't it?
My kids.
My son.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
Oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say, my son started daycare like 4 or 5 months ago now, and he's still crying every morning. And I'm just like, you just got to do it,
Yeah. My little boy is okay now. It's a different crying. It's more like, I wanted to watch a movie this morning, or he's all confused because we've been in lockdown for so long. And so like, he's like, I wanted to play with my Legos, and it's a different, but it's still this like anguish. And he's 4 years old. It's not every day. But I loved what you said, Rebecca, about it's like you have this new child, like every phase. You've got to relearn how to parent in a lot of ways. And I think what's so challenging in general is just the relentlessness of parenthood.
Yeah. I think all the time I want another baby because I love babies and I want one. For so many reasons, I'm not going to have a baby. But I've recently thought, like, is the reason that I want another baby so badly is because I already know how to do that one. Like, I already know how to like have a baby and have a toddler and these things that like I've experienced with my two older kids. And of course, every kid's different and it wouldn't be exactly the same as it was before for a variety of reasons. But is it, part of me is like, well, can I just focus on having a baby because I know what it's like to feed a baby and change diapers and schedule a routine. And now my kids are getting older and I'm like, I'm entering tween life. Like that's a whole different thing. And my daughter's 8 and going through a sea of emotions as like a hormonal 8-year-old girl. And it's like, it feels wild and crazy. And I've been a mom now for so long and I'm still having constant, like, who is this kid that I'm with now? Like, what's going on today?
Mm. And do you feel that way about yourself? Because every day is different. And sometimes I'm kind of like, and I think we said this, oh wait, Pi's coming back. So I want to, Pi, we lost you, but I want to, I would love to continue hearing you speak because I was really listening. And
I'm so sorry. That was my husband calling the daycare, and like for some reason then ended up he called again and it kicked me off the Zoom, so I apologize. But daycare went awful so it's not just me, so that's
well,
that's,
congratulations for that.
I don't know what I was hoping for. Like part of me was like, I hope he's better for him, and then I'd be like, but why is he better for you? So I don't know whether I feel happy or sad about that. But yeah, anyway, it's just a really huge shift, and it's a real decision. I made the decision really for Flynn, my 2-year-old, to move. And it's good for all those reasons. It's good, but it's a really big shift. And I think the fact that I cried 3 times already, just hearing you all talk and share your stories means that I'm quite emotional. Yeah, it's a bit of an emotional time.
Also valid emotions and like well heard in this group, there's a lot of tears to shed when you're transitioning in any way, but as your role as a mom transitions definitely feels hard.
Yeah. Pi, how are you feeling about the work situation? You said you kind of have taken a step back from your career.
Yeah, that's been really hard. But so I'm still consulting with the company I was working for in San Francisco. It works out to be about a day, but I sort of spread it over 5 days really. And or 6 days really, Saturday. But yeah, that's been a really big shift. I feel grateful able to do that. I feel very lucky my husband's able to work, and so financially there isn't a financial pressure for me to work, which is a huge relief because that hasn't always been the case. But I think career-wise, I definitely have defined myself in my career. I worked for the UN and I've lived all over the world, and I worked at an agency most recently on social impact, and I was working like 1 billion hours a week. So Flynn was full-time nanny share at another kid's house, and I worked all day until I picked him up. I tried to make sure I had like 2 hours with him for bath time and dinner, put him down, and then I started work again. Like I just worked all the time. So in many ways, I probably needed to do this for him. I definitely think, but I also wonder, and I would love to hear from others on this too, like if now we have just spent the last 6 weeks every day together, like which we haven't done since he was born. And because of lockdown in SF, like actually we spent, the 3 of us, my husband, Flynn and I, spent all our time together. But it was never really just me and him. And he started having separation anxiety, and this daycare transition has been really difficult for him. And so I have a lot of guilt in that. I'm like, this is good that I'm spending time with him. Am I making him worse? Like, is this harder for him to transition? Am I damaging him? And, who am I without this career that I've built for the last sort of 20 years? Like, who do I, like, yeah, I'm struggling with it, to be honest. It's a big shift.
Yeah. I think that's probably what I've struggled most with, to be honest, the career thing with the babies and being used to like building a business in New York and having no responsibilities other than to myself and just owning my time. And I think you have kids, you don't own your time anymore. Like, they own you. And I mentioned this earlier about going from 1 to 2, I've been like completely shell shocked because I kind of had it sussed, you know, my little boy was in kindy these days. And so I could like do my work. And now I'm like, oh my God, now I have to have like 2 lots of child. It's like a whole thing. But I do know, I don't really have any advice. I just know what is true for me is that if I'm not happy, then my kids aren't happy. And I know that for me to be happy, I need to work. And I don't need to work all the time, but I need to be able to do things like this. I need to be able to do what kind of fills me up. And I think as soon as I was okay with saying out loud, my children don't fulfill me completely. They don't.
Yeah.
I love them more than anything else in the world. And I'm loath to admit that I kind of want another one. And I'm going to go completely batshit crazy at that point. But I love my work as well. And that's okay. And, you know, and I'm such a better mother when I can do things that, you know, I'm a multifaceted woman. I need all of these different things. And if if anything taught me that I don't have what it takes to be a stay-at-home mother, it was lockdown, it was pandemic, and I was just kind of going crazy. So, you know, I'm only working part-time, but you know, I only had a baby a few months ago, but I do need those like few hours a day where I'm doing stuff that makes me feel like a human and not. I had kind of like a moment, and I said to my partner, I was like, I just feel like I'm existing to look after other people, and I need to do stuff that makes me feel like a woman as well as a mother. So as soon as I was okay with kind of acknowledging that, and of course my kids come first, they always will, but I need stuff outside of them, then it was easier for me to arrange my life in a way that honored that kind of like confession, because it feels like you're not allowed to say that, which I think is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think we just all need to give ourselves grace to like say the truth, which is that you need something other than just your kids in your life, like, and that's okay to say.
Yeah.
My therapist, because I was like crying to him after the first day I spent all week home with Flynn by myself without my husband, and I was like, how do people do it? I'm just a failure of a mama. And he said, I don't think anyone has kids to spend all day every day with them. And I was like, what? Oh.
Yeah, no, too much.
And I was like, they don't. And he's like, no, people like, it's something you do. There's other things you get from, you know, parenthood as well. Yeah. So anyway, I thought
I just want to say, Pi, as a former preschool teacher, I used to teach 2s and 3-year-olds, that the separation anxiety thing, we used to deal with that a ton, especially for our kids who were 2 and coming to school for the first time, that had been, you know, at home with their mums up until that point, not even in a nanny share or anything. And I know that it's such a difficult moment to see them so distraught when they walk in that door, and you feel like the worst person in the world. You're like, what am I doing to my kid? Like, they're going to be traumatized for the rest of their life because of this. Like, I'm a terrible person. But honestly, as from the teacher perspective, like 5 minutes, typically no more than 5 minutes after they get into the classroom and all their little classmates are there and they get swept up into circle time and welcome song and all that kind of stuff, they are completely fine. Like, just to give you some peace of mind, like, he's not sitting in a corner crying all day. No offense. I mean, thinking about you all day. He's really not. Like, they keep them so busy, and it really is something that, and we used to see it all the time with kids. Like, we would have kids come in and they were almost like putting on a show for their mom and dad. Like, they would be totally distraught at drop off, and then like 5 minutes later they would be totally well adjusted and having the best day ever until, you know, 3 p.m. from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m., whatever time their parents came to pick them up. And then as soon as like the mom or dad would walk in the door, if that's who was doing pickup, they would like get really sad again and kind of like put on this big performance of like, how dare you, so it's a little, there's a little bit of that in it too, but don't worry.
Thank
He's
you.
not having like, that doesn't last all day. It's so rare that it lasts for even more than like maybe at the most 15 or 20 minutes. And that's on like for a kid who's having a really difficult transition on their worst day.
Thank you. That does make me feel better. Just that kids are doing it and I'm not damaging him.
You are not damaging him.
No, I think imagine how damaged, every generation would be if the drop off at kindy, at daycare was truly traumatizing. I mean, we'd be raising like a generation gap. So, like I think every parent can relate to that. Pi, you're definitely not alone in that. It's awful. And it's so, God, it's like that primal thing, right? You're like, I'm giving my child away and they're screaming, but kids are so, Cassandra, because, being in that position as well, would you agree that kids are just so resilient? You would have seen that so much.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of that was the coolest thing. I mean, it's been a long time since I've worked in that environment, but that was like the coolest thing for me about watching the kids, especially when they come in so little. Like so many of the kids were either had just turned 2, and then we kind of had them up until they had turned 3, and that is such a growth year in terms of not only their physical but just cognitive development. And we had kids that would come in that were basically like still pretty much like babies. Sometimes they had like just made the cutoff and they were only like they were under 2, and then by the time they left they were like these independent little people with so much agency. So it really is, I mean, they adjust so much in that environment. I really do believe that like a group setting is really a good thing for kids at that age. Like they get so much out of it and they're so resilient. Like they can go through really strong, powerful emotions and then just like bounce back right away. And I think that's a good thing. I think you want your kid to be resilient, like you don't want everything to be just like rainbows and puppies for them all the time. And like that sounds maybe kind of weird, but I think it's good for them to go through some hard stuff, to have to process strong feelings. And if that's if part of the way that happens is dealing with some separation from mom or dad at drop offs, I think that's totally just part of their development at that age.
There were times when my son was young and since I stayed home with him, he didn't have to go to daycare and he didn't start a preschool until he was 3. But there were times during those first 3 years where I thought like, am I doing a disservice to him by staying home with him because he's not forced to like be independent about certain things? In like eating, for example, he was the worst eater. He ate everything until the day he decided he would eat nothing. And it was such a struggle for me because by the time we got to dinner time, I was like tapped out, like done. So I gave up a lot because I was just like, let's just get through dinner and go to bed. And like, I'm so tired. And often I would think like, gosh, if this kid was in a daycare or if he had a nanny and he had someone else he had to reckon with aside from his mom, who we felt the most comfortable with being like super overly emotional with, like how different would he be? And there was a lot of times where I felt like it would have been maybe good for his development for him to have to show up in that way without me there. And of course he's fine. And he barely remembers even being home with me full time. And he eats every single thing under the sun. And like, it all worked out okay. But when I was in the thick of it, I really had a hard time with like balancing my decision to stay home when like how that affected him just in general. There's no easy way.
We can't win, can we?
Yeah.
ladies, we are going to wrap up this conversation shortly, but Emily, I just wanted to say hi because I can see you on our screen. Did you want to jump into the chat before we kind of wrap up?
Very quickly. This is amazing. I mean, I can, Charlotte, I really feel for you as well. I'm in New York, a Kiwi. I've been here for 7 years now, and never in a million years would I thought that I would have a kid in New York, but here I am, and I've got a little girl, Goldie, who's 5 weeks old.
Oh, congratulations.
Wow.
So it's all very new. Yeah, and I guess for me, it's just I'm about to, I work for myself, so I'm trying to think about how to move forward and navigate career and motherhood, and also being someone who is very motivated by what I do and what I love, and trying to sort of find myself going forward is a real challenge. So this is amazing. Thank you.
5 weeks. You're incredible. Yeah. You're actually on a live talk in front of a camera at 5
I made
weeks
myself turn my camera on. I'm like,
I'm
wearing leggings.
No, this is
you're a hero.
This is what this is for. I'm actually just in complete awe of you. And I love that there are all these this is like an expat theme going on. Yeah.
It's because we're all stuck.
We're all stuck.
Yeah, wherever we are, So
yeah,
it's just nice to have sounding boards and know that I'm not alone. So thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. This was kind of exactly what these sessions were designed for. These kind of small groups of women to come and talk. And I think sometimes on Instagram Live, it can be kind of there's a lot of people and it can be a bit overwhelming, but there's a really nice sense of intimacy with a Zoom talk like this. And you've got a group of people and you can just kind of talk with. I personally could talk all day, but I know that we all have busy lives and children. And
really quick, if you guys all want to drop your handles or go into the chat to connect with each other afterwards, please feel free to do so.
I'm just going to put my thing, and then this is my email address as well. We must think of a way to we're doing several of these, so over the next few months. And maybe Lissy and Rebecca, we can talk about how to potentially connect people as well, because I would love that. It's been really nice to speak with all of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for joining.
We have everybody's email, so we'll be sure to let you guys know directly when our next session is, because we'd love to have you. And then, as Rebecca said, drop your handles in, follow each other, continue the network outside of this call, because this has been really lovely to listen to. I also work for By Heart. I just don't have any babies, so I just like to listen and get prepared, but I have no stories to share.
We're training you.
Yeah. All right, everybody, have a lovely rest of your day or evening, wherever you are.
So much.